Hi there, and welcome back to Haunting Vales. Tonight's story begins with a letter, found in a drawer, never sealed, never sent. It was written by a woman who vanished the very night she meant to post it. A letter that spoke of betrayal, fear, and a secret she could no longer keep. When Hercule Poirot reads her final words, he realizes the truth was never lost, only buried beneath the silence of those who feared it most. What was she trying to say before the ink ran dry? And who made sure her words would never leave that room? Stay with us till the end. And if you love mysteries where every word hides a heartbeat, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Haunting Vales. Chapter 1. The Letter Arrives. The evening rain fell in long silver threads across the London streets, washing the city in a restless shimmer. It was one of those quiet nights that seemed to hold its breath, as though something unspeakable waited just beyond the edge of sound. In his flat on Whitehaven Mansions, Hercule Poirot sat by the fire, polishing a small silver letter opener until it gleamed like a mirror. He was alone, except for the soft ticking of the clock on the mantel and the crackle of the logs. Order, cleanliness, routine. These were the things that brought comfort to his precise mind. But that night, there was something in the air, an odd stillness, as though fate itself had paused to watch. At exactly 9:30, the doorbell rang. Poirot lifted his head. He had not been expecting anyone. His visitor's knock was neither hurried nor hesitant, but measured. A rhythm, deliberate and careful. He placed the letter opener down, rose, and went to the door. Standing in the hallway was a young man in his late 20s, his coat dark with rain. His eyes, gray, tired, and uncertain, studied Poirot for a long moment before he spoke. "Mr. Poirot, I was told you could help me." Poirot inclined his head slightly. "Then you were told correctly, monsieur. Please come in." The young man stepped inside. Poirot guided him to the fire, offered him a towel, and watched as he tried to steady his trembling hands. There was fear in his eyes, but not the ordinary fear of danger. It was something deeper, like a man haunted by the echo of something unfinished. "My name is Henry Blackwell," he said finally, his voice low. "I found something this morning. I'm not sure what to make of it." Poirot nodded. "Go on." Henry reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a small envelope. It was yellowed with age, the paper soft and fragile. Across the front, in faded ink, was written a name. "To my dear Henry." Poirot frowned. "Your name?" Henry nodded. "But I've never seen this before." The envelope was hidden inside an old desk I bought last week at an estate auction. It was sealed. I opened it only today. He handed it to Poirot. The detective turned it carefully in his hands. The seal was broken, but the faint scent of lavender clung to the paper, a ghostly fragrance that seemed to whisper of a woman long gone. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper. The handwriting was elegant but faint, written in a hurried, uncertain hand. Poirot read it aloud. "My dear Henry, if you are reading this, I am gone. I did not wish for you to learn the truth in this way, but I have no choice. There is something in this house, something that will destroy us both. You must never return to Blackwood Manor. Never. Forgive me. Eleanor." Poirot placed the letter down slowly. The firelight flickered against his face, revealing no surprise, only thought. "When was this written?" he asked. Henry swallowed. "The auction record said the desk came from Blackwood Manor, my family's old estate in Surrey. But Eleanor, I don't know who she is. My parents never spoke of anyone by that name." Poirot leaned forward. "And yet she wrote to you, years ago, warning you of something terrible. Tell me, Mr. Blackwell, how old are you?" 28. Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. "And how old was the desk, would you say?" It looked antique. Late 19th century, maybe, over 50 years old. Poirot rose and walked to the window. The rain had softened to a drizzle. but the air outside seemed heavy, waiting. "This letter," he said quietly, "was written long before you were born. Yet it bears your name. Either someone wished to reach across time, or someone wished to deceive." Henry shook his head. "I don't understand. I just felt like I had to bring it to you." Poirot studied him closely. There was honesty in the young man's voice, but also something else. A weight he carried, but could not name. "Tell me," Poirot said, "this manor, does it still stand?" "Yes," Henry said. "It's been abandoned for years. My father sold the land before he died. I've never been there." Poirot nodded slowly. "Then perhaps it is time that we pay it a visit." Henry blinked. "Tonight?" Poirot smiled faintly. "The rain, the darkness, the mystery. Why should we wait until morning?" The drive to Surrey was long and silent. The roads were slick, the countryside lost beneath a blanket of mist. Henry sat behind the wheel, his knuckles pale against the steering wheel, while Poirot watched the passing darkness through the window. At last, the iron gates appeared, tall, rusted, and half swallowed by ivy. Blackwood Manor loomed beyond, its broken windows reflecting the dull gleam of the headlights. Even in ruin, it was magnificent. Columns framed the entrance, a grand staircase visible through shattered glass. The house seemed to breathe, slow, heavy, resentful. Poirot stepped out, his polished shoes crunching against the gravel. "A house that remembers too much," he murmured. "Such places are rarely silent." Henry unlocked the door. It swung open with a moan, and the smell of decay drifted out, a mixture of dust, rot, and something faintly sweet like wilted flowers. They entered the hall. The wallpaper peeled like old skin. The chandelier hung crooked, its crystals coated in grime. Yet beneath the ruin, there was still an echo of beauty, of something once grand and beloved. Poirot lit a small lamp he had brought. Its glow revealed portraits on the wall, stern men, graceful women, and one painting that caught his attention immediately. A young woman in a white dress. Her eyes were soft, but there was sadness in them. The nameplate beneath read, "Eleanor Blackwell, 1901. Poirot turned slowly to Henry. "Your surname is Blackwell. Tell me, have you ever heard of an Eleanor in your family?" Henry shook his head. "Never. But that's her name. That's the woman who wrote the letter." Poirot stepped closer to the portrait. The paint had cracked with age, but Eleanor's gaze seemed alive, watchful, almost pleading. He examined the frame and noticed faint scratches along the lower edge, as though someone had pried at it. He ran his fingers along the wood and then paused. Behind the frame was a thin slit. Something was hidden there. With careful precision, Poirot eased out a second envelope, sealed with a faded wax mark. It bore no name. He opened it. Inside was a small black and white photograph. A man and a woman standing before Blackwood Manor. The man's face had been scratched out violently, but the woman's remained untouched. Eleanor, unmistakably. Poirot turned to Henry. "This photograph, do you recognize the man's clothing? It seems far more recent than the date of her portrait." Henry leaned closer, frowning. "It looks like the style from the 1930s. Poirot nodded. "Indeed. That would be about 20 years after her time. So then, who revived her memory, and why?" A faint sound echoed down the hall. A door creaked somewhere deep within the house. Both men froze. Poirot set the photograph aside and straightened his tie. "We are not alone." Henry swallowed. "You think someone's here?" Poirot tilted his head, listening. "Perhaps. Or perhaps the house itself wishes to speak." They followed the sound through the corridor until they reached the library. The door was ajar. Inside, the smell of old paper filled the air. Bookshelves lined the walls, and in the center stood a desk, the twin of the one Henry had bought at the auction. Poirot examined it. "You see, my friend, there were once two desks. One remained here. The other, its pair, found its way to you." A strange coincidence, is it not? Henry nodded slowly. Then maybe the letter wasn't meant for me at all. Poirot glanced at him sharply. Or perhaps it was meant for your blood. There are truths that sleep within families, Mr. Blackwell. Truths that wake only when called. He opened a drawer. Inside lay a single object, a small silver key tied with a faded blue ribbon. Attached was a note in the same handwriting as before. The truth lies beneath the floor. Poirot stood very still. Then, without a word, he knelt and tapped the wooden boards with his knuckles. One plank sounded hollow. Henry helped him lift it. Beneath the floor was a small compartment, wrapped in cloth. Poirot drew it out and unwrapped it carefully. Inside lay another letter, its paper almost turned to dust. He read it silently. Then his expression changed, tightened, darkened. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. This was never meant to be found. Listen to this. To whom it may concern, I cannot live with what has been done. The truth of Blackwood Manor will destroy us all. I have done a terrible thing, buried the evidence, sealed the secret, but I can still hear her crying in the walls. May God forgive me. Abbe. Henry stared. Abbe. Those are my initials. Yes, said Poirot quietly. But this was written long before you were born. Henry's face went pale. You mean someone else? Another Henry Blackwell? Poirot nodded. Indeed. And he was confessing to something. Something buried. Something that haunted this house. The wind howled outside. Somewhere upstairs, a door slammed shut with a violent echo. Poirot turned toward the sound. The house speaks again. Henry's voice trembled. Mr. Poirot, what do you think happened here? Poirot looked at him, the firelight from his lamp casting deep shadows across his sharp features. I think, he said softly, that a woman died here, that someone tried to hide her death, and that the truth, my dear Mr. Blackwell, has waited a very long time to be heard. He looked down at the letter in his hands, the letter she never sent. The past, Poirot murmured, never stays buried forever. Outside, the rain began again, whispering against the windows like 1,000 forgotten voices. And in that quiet, broken house, somewhere beneath the weight of time, a secret stirred. Chapter 2. The Woman in the Photograph. The storm had eased by morning, but the clouds still hung low, heavy and bruised, as though the sky itself was unwilling to let go of the night before. Inside Blackwood Manor, the air remained stale and damp, carrying the faint perfume of dust and the lingering echo of something unspoken. Poirot stood by the window, looking out over the overgrown gardens. The branches of the trees scratched gently against the glass, whispering secrets only the dead might hear. Behind him, Henry Blackwell sat slumped in an armchair, the photograph of the woman clutched tightly in his hands. She looked so real, Henry murmured, like she could step out of the frame at any moment. Poirot turned, his eyes narrowing. Yes, there's something in her expression, fear perhaps, or guilt. People rarely notice the truth that hides in faces, Mr. Blackwell, but it is always there. He walked toward the fire, where the envelope and letters lay on the mantel. Eleanor Blackwell, a name lost to history, and yet she left behind a warning, a secret, and a confession written by a man who shared your name. The question now is, what binds you to them? Henry's eyes lifted. Do you believe I'm related to them? Poirot smiled faintly. I believe, my dear sir, that blood has a memory, and sometimes that memory refuses to fade. He picked up the photograph again. The man's face had been scratched out, but Poirot's trained eye noticed a faint marking near the corner, barely visible, almost erased. He held it closer to the firelight. There, he said softly. Do you see? A mark, the corner of a stamp, perhaps, or an emblem of a studio. He turned it over. On the back, faded but legible, were the words, Thorne and Company. Photographers, Belgrave Street, London. Poirot looked up. We shall pay them a visit. 2 hours later, they stood outside the small, dimly lit photography shop on Belgrave Street. A single sign hung above the door, its paint peeling, the windows cloudy with age. Inside, the scent of old chemicals and varnish lingered in the air. An elderly man, thin and bent, appeared from the back room. His spectacles hung crookedly on his nose, and his fingers were stained from years of handling negatives. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" he asked politely. Poirot smiled. "Indeed you can. We seek information about a photograph that bears your company's name. It may be quite old." He handed over the picture carefully. The old man took it, adjusting his spectacles. "Ah, yes. Thorne and Company. That was my father's business in the early days. We've been here for nearly a century." Poirot leaned forward slightly. "Can you tell us anything about this picture? When it might have been taken? Or who these people were?" The man squinted, turning it under the light. I'd say this is from around 1932 or 1933. The background. Yes, that's our outdoor setup at the time. But this woman," he frowned, tapping the photo, "she came here more than once." Henry looked up sharply. "You knew her?" The man nodded slowly. "Not personally, but I remember her face. My father used to speak of her. Said she was always nervous, looking over her shoulder, never staying long. Paid in cash. Wanted her negatives destroyed after each session." Poirot's eyes gleamed with curiosity. And yet one photograph survived. The old man sighed. "Sometimes people make promises they don't keep, sir. My father, he kept certain records. I'll have a look." He disappeared into the back room, leaving Poirot and Henry in the faint smell of developer and silence. Henry whispered, "If she came here in the 30s, that means she lived years after her portrait. But she wrote in her letter that she was already gone." Poirot nodded slowly. "Perhaps, to her, she was gone. The letter may not have spoken of death, but of disappearance." The old man returned with a small leather ledger, its edges crumbling. He turned the pages carefully until his finger stopped. "Here," he said, pointing to an entry. "E. Blackwell, May 1932. And again, August 1933. Both under the same name. Is there an address listed?" Poirot asked. "Only one, Blackwood Manor." Poirot exchanged a look with Henry. "Then she was still living there," Henry said quietly. The man hesitated. "There's something else," he said. "My father once mentioned that she wasn't alone. She always came with a man, a tall man with a cane and gloves. Never gave his name." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "A man with gloves. Curious detail. Did your father ever say why she wanted the negatives destroyed?" The man shook his head. "He said she told him some things should never be seen twice." Poirot thanked him, left his card, and they returned to the street. The wind had picked up, cold and sharp, cutting through the gray morning. Henry's voice trembled slightly. "What does it mean, Mr. Poirot?" Poirot's eyes narrowed as he studied the passing crowd. "It means, my friend, that the past is not content to sleep. And I fear that the man with the cane and gloves, he may be the one Eleanor feared most." That afternoon, they returned to the manor. The air inside seemed heavier now, as if the walls had listened to their absence. Poirot went straight to the library, laying the photograph and letters upon the desk like pieces of a puzzle. "The truth is layered," he murmured, "one piece above another, until the smallest clue reveals the whole." Henry paced near the window. "I still don't understand why my name was on that letter. If she died before I was born." Poirot interrupted gently. "She wrote to her Henry. Perhaps not you, but the first Henry. The one who signed the confession we found. You think she was his wife? Or his sister? Or his victim?" Poirot said calmly. "But whichever she was, she feared him, and she left behind words to warn someone, perhaps anyone who shared his blood." A low creak echoed from upstairs. Henry froze. "That came from the east wing," he whispered. Poirot lifted the lamp. "Then let us see who disturbs the silence of this house." They climbed the staircase slowly. The wallpaper darkened with age, the steps moaning beneath their weight. At the top, a long corridor stretched before them, lined with closed doors. Poirot stopped at the third. The sound had come from there, a soft tapping, rhythmic and deliberate. He turned the knob and pushed. The room beyond was small, filled with boxes covered in sheets, old furniture, forgotten memories, and on the far wall, faintly visible beneath a layer of dust, something written in chalk. Henry stepped closer. The words were barely legible. "I see her in the glass." He turned to Poirot, his face pale. "What does that mean?" Poirot studied the message. "Perhaps it means what it says. The guilty often see their crimes reflected back at them." He lifted the sheet off one of the boxes and froze. Beneath it was a cracked mirror, tall and ornate, its surface clouded with age. Poirot's reflection shimmered faintly within it. For a moment, he thought he saw movement, someone standing behind him. He turned sharply, but the room was empty. Henry whispered, "Did you see that?" Poirot did not answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer to the mirror, his eyes narrowing. Around the edges of the glass, the frame was chipped, revealing something dark beneath the wood. He touched it gently. "There is something hidden here." With slow, steady movements, he pried the back panel loose. Inside was a folded piece of newspaper, yellow and brittle. He unfolded it carefully. The headline read, "Mystery Death at Blackwood Manor. Woman found dead in her room." The article was short, dated September 14th, 1933. Poirot read aloud. "The body of Miss Eleanor Blackwell was discovered by household staff at Blackwood Manor early yesterday morning. Cause of death uncertain." The family declined to comment. Henry stared. "So she really died here?" Poirot nodded slowly. "And within weeks of her last photograph." He turned the paper over, and there, in pencil, someone had written one line. He said the mirror would show the truth. Poirot's expression hardened. "Then it seems our Mr. Henry Blackwell believed the mirror held some terrible secret." Henry whispered, "Do you think she was murdered?" Poirot looked around the dim room. "I think, my friend, that the woman in the photograph feared for her life, and with good reason." He walked to the window. The rain had started again, fine and relentless. "Eleanor wrote 2 letters," Poirot said quietly. "One to warn, and one to confess. But there is something missing still. Something she never sent, the one that could name her killer." Henry's voice shook. "The letter she never sent." Poirot turned to him slowly. "Exactly, and I believe it is still here." As he spoke, a cold draft swept through the room, fluttering the old newspaper in his hands. From somewhere deep within the house came the sound of something falling, a heavy thud, echoing through the halls like a heartbeat. Poirot set the paper down and listened. "Come," he said softly. "The manor is speaking again. Let us hear what it has to say." Chapter 3. The Truth Beneath the Floor. The corridors of Blackwood Manor were colder that night, as though the house itself had drawn in a breath and refused to let it go. Every creak, every faint rustle of fabric, carried through the silence like a whisper from the dead. Poirot moved carefully, his lamp held high, the golden circle of light pushing back the shadows as he and Henry descended the long staircase. The air was heavy with the scent of damp stone and something older, an earthy smell, like the breath of buried time. They followed the echo of the thud they'd heard moments earlier through the hall, past the portraits that stared down with painted eyes. When they reached the main hall, they saw it immediately. One of the floorboards near the fireplace had come loose. Henry knelt beside it, his face pale. "That wasn't like that before," he whispered. Poirot nodded. "No, the house wished to draw our attention to it." He set the lamp beside them and knelt, examining the broken plank. It had been pried up from underneath, not by accident. With careful precision, he lifted it away, revealing a hollow space beneath. Inside lay a small metal box. Henry stared. That wasn't there before. Poirot said nothing. He brushed the dust away and opened the box. Inside were several letters, old, folded, their paper yellowed and fragile, and beneath them, a small locket of gold. He removed the locket first. It was engraved with the initials EB. He opened it. Inside was a tiny photograph. Eleanor Blackwell, unmistakable. But beside her, a man's face stared out. Not scratched, not ruined this time, but clear. It was Henry's face, or rather, the face of a man who looked exactly like him. Henry recoiled. That's impossible. Poirot's eyes narrowed. No, my friend, that is not impossible, only disturbing. He handed Henry the locket. This must be the first Henry Blackwell, the one who signed the confession. Your ancestor, perhaps your grandfather. Henry's hands trembled as he held it. He looks just like me. But she's wearing the same dress as in her portrait, the same as in the newspaper photo. Poirot opened the letters one by one, his expression tightening with every line he read. Finally, he stopped at one, an unfinished letter, the ink smudged by tears or rain. He began to read aloud. Henry, my beloved, you have asked me to keep your secret, but I cannot. What you have done cannot be buried. She is beneath the floor of the east wing, and every night I hear her crying. You say it was an accident. You say it was mercy, but I know it was neither. I will write no more of this. I fear the walls themselves remember her name. If anything happens to me, know this, I tried to save you, and I failed. Eleanor. Poirot's voice fell silent. The words seemed to hang in the cold air like a breath that would not fade. Henry looked at him, his eyes wide with disbelief. There's another body here. Poirot folded the letter carefully. It appears so. A woman buried beneath the floor of the east wing. He stood, his gaze steady. And that is where we must go. The east wing was the oldest part of the manor, long abandoned, its walls warped with damp, and its ceiling cracked like old bone. Their footsteps echoed as they entered, the sound swallowed by the dark. Poirot's lamp flickered as the wind moved through the broken windows. Tell me, Mr. Blackwell, he said quietly, what do you know of your family history? Very little, Henry admitted. My father never spoke of it. He said the past was better left alone. Ah, Poirot said softly, and yet the past refuses such mercy. They reached the end of the corridor. The floorboards were warped and uneven. Poirot knelt and pressed his palm against the wood. Listen, he said. Do you hear it? Henry frowned. Hear what? Poirot knocked twice. A hollow sound echoed beneath. Dear, Poirot said, this is where she lies. Henry stared. You think she's still? I think, Poirot said grimly, that the truth waits just beneath us. He took a small crowbar from his coat, always prepared for the practical, and began to pry at the boards. One came up, then another, revealing the cold dirt beneath. The smell was immediate, a faint, sour odor of age and decay. Henry turned away, his hand over his mouth. My God! Poirot said nothing. He continued until the outline of a small wooden box became visible, a coffin, shallow and hastily built. The wood had rotted, the edges soft. Poirot brushed away the dirt. The name carved faintly on the lid read only one word. Clara. Henry looked confused. Clara? That's not Eleanor. Poirot's voice was low. No, Eleanor's letter said, she is beneath the floor. This must be the one she wrote of. He forced the lid open carefully. Inside lay bones wrapped in what remained of a silk dress, and beside the remains, a small silver hairpin. Poirot held it up to the light. The initials CB. Henry's voice trembled. Who was she? Poirot's eyes grew distant. A servant, perhaps, or a sister. But whoever she was, her death was meant to be hidden. He examined the coffin again, and there, wedged between the boards, was another letter. Torn, folded, and sealed with wax. Poirot took it out, his hand steady despite the chill. This, he said softly, is the letter she never sent. He opened it carefully. The ink was faint but legible. To whoever finds this, my heart can bear no more. Henry has done what no man should. He has taken life, and now the house turns against him. I have hidden the truth, but it calls to me in dreams. If you find her, know that she was innocent. Her name was Clara, and she loved him. That was her only crime. When they find me, tell them I tried to stop him. Tell them I saw her in the glass every night, asking me to speak. Eleanor Blackwell. Poirot folded the paper with care, his eyes solemn. Now we understand, he said. Eleanor tried to protect the woman her husband killed. She hid the body, kept his secret, but it destroyed her. Henry stared at the coffin. My grandfather. He was a murderer? Poirot met his gaze. He was a man who believed he could hide the truth. But no truth, my friend, stays buried forever. The wind groaned through the cracks in the walls. The lamp flickered, and Poirot placed the letter back inside the box, beside Clara's remains. Let her rest, he said quietly. At last, the letter she never sent has been found. They returned to the main hall in silence. The fire still burned faintly in the grate, the flames low and weak. Henry sat down heavily, his hands shaking. It's strange, he said softly. I feel like she wanted me to find it, like she waited for me to come. Poirot nodded. Perhaps she did. Blood calls to blood, even through the years. The sins of the past whisper until they are answered. He walked to the window and looked out into the rain. You see, Mr. Blackwell, mysteries are not born from evil alone. Sometimes they are born from love twisted by fear. Eleanor loved her husband, but she loved truth more. And for that, she died. Henry's voice broke. What do I do now? Poirot turned. You tell the truth. You have freed this house from silence. It will never haunt you again, unless you choose to lie. He took the letters from the table and handed them to Henry. Give these to the authorities. Let the name of Eleanor Blackwell be cleared. Let the dead finally sleep. Henry nodded slowly. I will. Poirot smiled faintly. Good. For once the truth is spoken, the ghost will have no more to say. As they left the house, the wind stilled. The rain softened into a quiet drizzle, falling gently across the ivy and stone. Poirot paused at the gate, glancing back at the manor one last time. The windows, once dark and watchful, now reflected only the gray of dawn. The house, at last, seemed at peace. Poirot murmured softly, Order has been restored. Henry looked at him. Do you believe in ghosts, Mr. Poirot? Poirot smiled faintly. No, my friend. Only in the ghosts we carry within us. Chapter 4. The Truth That Was Never Meant to Be Found. The night was colder than any before. The London fog seemed to breathe with a pulse of its own, thick, unyielding, alive. Hercule Poirot stood near the fireplace of the house on Marivalle Lane, his sharp eyes following the flames as they danced against the soot-darkened bricks. The final pieces of the puzzle had gathered themselves into the shape of truth, but even truth, he knew, could wound. Elena Farrow sat in the armchair opposite him, her hands trembling, her eyes hollow. The letter, the one that had lain hidden for 20 years, was now open upon the table. Its edges had browned, its ink faded, but the words were still there. Words written by her mother, Catherine Farrow, on the night she died. Poirot's voice broke the silence. Elena, I must tell you what I have learned. You deserve that much, though I fear what it will do to your heart. Elena looked up slowly. You already know, don't you? About my father. Poirot's gaze shifted to the window. The fog pressed against it like a pale hand. Yes, but it is not as you think. She whispered, Please tell me. Poirot clasped his hands behind his back and began. Your mother did not die in despair. She died protecting you from the man who sought to use her silence as a shield for his own guilt. The man who loved her once, but who loved power more. Elena frowned, confusion shadowing her grief. My father. Poirot shook his head. No, my dear, not your father. Your uncle, Charles Farrow. A breath caught in her throat. The name lingered in the air like the sound of distant thunder. Poirot went on, each word steady, deliberate. He was the one who murdered Victor Halliday. Your mother discovered the truth. She wrote a confession letter to be sent to Scotland Yard, but it never left this house. He found her before she could send it. Elena's eyes widened. He killed her. Poirot turned to the table, touching the corner of the letter gently. No, he did not need to. She fell, trying to escape him. Her death was an accident born of fear, not of violence. But afterward, he made sure her story would never be told. He sealed this letter away and spread whispers that she had taken her own life. For a long moment, only the fire spoke. Then Elena whispered, "He lived in this house for years after, surrounded by her things, by her portrait." Poirot nodded. "Guilt is a clever ghost, mademoiselle. It pretends to be memory." She lowered her face into her hands, trembling. "And the letter came to me now, because—" Poirot turned toward the mantelpiece, where a cracked clock ticked faintly. "Because guilt, even after death, finds a way. When your uncle died, his lawyer followed instructions to deliver his personal effects to you. The letter was among them. He could not destroy it. He feared the judgment that might follow him into the grave. And so, fate, with its quiet patience, placed the truth where it always belonged." The room felt heavy, like a confession chamber. Poirot let the silence stretch. He had seen this before, the breaking of a soul beneath the sudden weight of revelation. Finally, Elena rose. She crossed the room to the window, where fog wrapped the glass in pale ribbons. "All these years," she whispered, "I hated my mother for leaving us, for leaving me, and now she never meant to go." Poirot's voice softened. "No, she meant to protect you, even if it cost her everything." Her tears came quietly. Poirot did not interrupt. He only turned his eyes toward the flickering light, where memory burned as real as fire. After a while, he spoke again. "The police will have their answers. The truth will rest where it should. But for you, Mademoiselle Poirot, there is one more decision. What will you do with this letter now that you know its weight?" She turned, her face pale but resolute. "I will keep it, not as proof, as remembrance." Poirot gave a single nod. "Then your mother's silence ends tonight." He moved to the door, taking his hat from the rack. The clock chimed once, a low, distant echo that sounded almost human. Poirot paused, his hand on the handle. "There is something I have learned," he said, without turning. "It is not always the crime that destroys a family. It is the lie told to hide it." And with that, he left. Outside, the air was sharp and unforgiving. Poirot walked down the stone path, the fog swallowing his small figure. The street lamps above him glowed like faint halos in the dark. A black car waited by the curb. Inspector Graves stepped out, tipping his hat. "All done, then?" Poirot nodded slowly. "All done. But it is a sad victory, my friend. Justice comes, yes, but sometimes too late to heal what time has already broken." Graves frowned. "She'll be all right." "In time," said Poirot. "Truth does not comfort. It cleanses. There is a difference." They stood for a while, listening to the sound of the wind moving through the empty street. Then Poirot got into the car, and the door shut with a hollow sound. As the engine started, the detective looked once more at the house disappearing into mist. He thought of the letter, the fragile, yellowed paper that had traveled 20 years through silence and guilt to deliver one final truth. In his mind, he heard Catherine Farrow's final words, written with trembling hand. "If this letter is ever found, let it speak for me. Let it tell my daughter that I loved her, and that love is not erased by death, only hidden by time." The car turned the corner, vanishing into fog, leaving behind the quiet house and the letter that was never meant to be sent, but was destined to be found. If you were drawn into the mystery of the letter she never sent, don't let the silence fade here. Subscribe now to uncover more untold cases of Hercule Poirot, where every clue hides a secret and every secret changes everything.